All the while, Elpam watched from atop the cliff, wondering if all the conditions had been met. According to him, the main goal of this mission was to lure the mushroom monster to the swamp area. Obviously, the basics of hunting involved nullifying the prey's greatest strength, and the swamp had subdued the fiend's weapon, its poison mist. On the other hand, Divo was still raring to go. In a mocking tone, he asked if the monster was feeling frustrated, now that its ability was of no use, but it mattered little to him. In the blink of an eye, he began swinging his flaming axe around, lashing it toward the monster, and his blow made direct contact. However, this was just the start. In the flow, he began dishing out strikes at lightning speed, using his rope attachment to maintain distance. Ultimately, the opponent began taking substantial damage. Apparently, the reason for luring the monster here wasn't just to block out its holes, but also because the swamp is a death trap. The muddy swamp for fast monsters like this is the worst place. As the beast tried to get back on its feet, it quickly realized that the mud had constrained its movements. At that moment, Elpam came through. Using his revolver skill, he hurled a fireball straight at his foe. Nevertheless, the beast was able to see the incoming blast and tried to protect itself with all its might. Their collision created an incredible smokescreen. On the field, Divo wondered if the battle had come to an end, but found the figure of the monster still standing, despite having a huge gaping hole in its body. However, this wasn't the time to get distracted. Elpam ordered him to aim for the core, suggesting it must be somewhere near the head, and Divo immediately enacted the command. Once again, he flung his axe toward the monster, but this time, it managed to grab hold of the weapon and in turn, pulled Divo toward it. Of course, the greatest telekinesis mage wouldn't simply stand around and watch his ally be killed, and hence, use his powers to chuck a huge log from the surroundings toward the monster. Although the beast was able to block the strike, it gave Divo just enough time to escape certain death. Grabbing onto a branch, he swung around, landing a heel kick directly to the opponent's head. Concurrently, the monster began to stumble, but Divo was far from having had enough. Without hesitation, he once again grabbed his weapon and dashed in to finish things once and for all. Thanks to his insane movement speed, he kept running from place to place. Meanwhile, Elpam once again used his telekinesis to erect a water barrier, blinding the foe and giving Divo the perfect chance to attack. However, not everything went according to plan. The monster caught a glimpse of Divo's figure past the water barrier and tried to pierce his body with its claws. But this was all part of the plan. The figure was just bait to find an opening in the enemy, and Divo appeared behind the monster, swiftly decapitating it with a single swing. The monster's head fell off as the body was left standing, almost as if it had frozen in time. Regardless, this marked the end of the battle. Down below, the exhausted Divo breathed a sigh of relief and signaled to Elpam. However, things were far from over. In a split second, the relieved look on Elpam's face turned to sheer horror as he saw the now headless monster continue with its rampant attacks. It sneaked behind Divo, knocking him to the ground and sending his weapon flying away. With this, it let out a terrifying roar, sending Elpam into panic mode. "How can this be? I'm sure I blew its head off," he exclaimed. But there was no time to contemplate. With the beast still active, he unleashes fire arrows. Of course, the monster managed to dodge it, but Elpam didn't give up either, using his telekinesis to send him mid-air. Nevertheless, this just ended up helping his foe, as the monster began climbing up the cliff to attack Elpam head-on. On the flip side, Elpam only had enough mana for one more fire arrow. For him, there was no mix time, and he couldn't just shoot it anywhere. Luckily for him, his contracted slave refused to go down. "Damn, this is pissing me off," Divo angrily announced as he got back on his feet. He attacked the monster from a distance, and even attempted to chop his body in two, resulting in the monster's lower half falling into the swamp. To him, this should have been enough to send the beast to its grave, but as fate would have it, they picked a fight with a relentless foe. Despite losing its head as well as its lower body, the monster continued its ascent to the cliff, this time with even more speed than before. As a result, Elpam had no other choice than to fire his last arrow. Unfortunately, he ended up missing, giving the monster a mountain of confidence, so much so that the monster got cocky enough to reveal its original head. From inside the monster's body, a black demonic face with red glowing eyes emerged with a shit-eating grin. But that was its most fatal mistake. "Is that your real head?" Elpam questioned. As it turned out, what Elpam had just unleashed was not his sole remaining blast, but rather a signal flare, or in other words, a bluff. Now having seen the beast's real head, he charged up his revolver skill one last time and blew the opponent into smithereens. The blast pierced through the monster's body and sent it collapsing to the ground. But despite this, it refused to give up, even at this moment, and unleash a huge poison mist wave. Seeing this, Devo commented on how it had persisted to the very end, but Elpam rescued him from the mist via his telekinesis power. Now on the cliff, Devo wondered if things had finally come to an end, and Elpam revealed they had, complimenting Devo on his performance just now. All that remained was for them to grab the Mana Stone. When the mist cleared, but it really looked like they had a tough foe on their hands. Regardless of all the beating it had taken, the monster was raring to go. Even in its current state, it jumped to the top of the cliff, revealing its core was still intact. It cast off its poison mist into the air while Devo watched all this unfold with a crazed and defeated look in his eyes. On the other hand, back in the Gaper Merchant headquarters, Lord Raykin was seen laughing away after hearing about Evis's failure. "So you came back just like that. That temper of yours is the same as before," he chuckled. Hearing this, Evis began to apologize for his mistake, suggesting that the situation had already gotten out of hand, and that it was better to let the Cygnus Knights take care of it. Just then, there was a loud knock on the door. Obviously, this annoyed Evis, who had specially ordered not to be disturbed during this meeting. Nevertheless, despite his vocal anger, the person banging decided to come in, and none other than Elpam came walking through the door. "I'm back," he proclaimed, seeing him. Lord Raykin was left with a huge grin on his face as he got interested in this kid and his antics. Raykin cheekily asks Evis what is going on, questioning if maybe someone has risen from their grave or something. Anyways, he introduces himself as Raykin, complimenting Elpam's survival. He claims this young adventurer is the kind of person they need the most right now in the Gapor organization. Hearing this praise, Elpam bows to Raykin, thanking him for his words. Raykin takes a liking to his polite demeanor and decides to ask him one question. That ability, can you show it off again in the 100-man gate? But even for someone like Elpam, that is going to be tough, and he lets Raykin know it. However, his arrogant reply riles Evis up, and he begins screaming. Lashing out at Elpam, he questions how a former slave talked to the leader of the famous Gaper Merchant like that. He announces he hasn't made Elpam an adventurer, so if he can pick and choose his own missions. "Don't forget that you still have a debt," he states. On the other hand, Raykin seems to be satisfied with Elpam's answer. To him, this means showcasing Elpam's ability isn't impossible. As a result, he decides to stop beating around the bush and gets right onto the topic, asking Elpam, "What do you want?" Later on, in a pub somewhere, Devo is seen spitting out his yummy adult juice in shock after what Elpam has managed to accomplish. Apparently, he has asked Raykin for 5 million mesos each to take part in the 100-man gate. That means, with Devo tagging along, they will get a whopping 10 million. That's too much, he claims. However, in the heat of the moment, it looks like he spits his drink right in Elpam's face. Regardless, at least to Devo, it looks like his boss is being too greedy. Surely, Raykin will refuse to pay such an exorbitant amount. Nevertheless, this isn't something they have to worry about. It is up to Raykin and Evis if they will pay up, and Devo doesn't really like this nonchalant attitude, stating that if this deal falls through, Evis will put them back in the Black Book, aka the Slave Dungeon. All of a sudden, someone walks into their conversation. "You look relaxed, unlike us who feel like dying," this voice proclaims. As it turns out, this voice belongs to Iboru, one of the team leaders in the last expedition. Along with him is the purple-haired captain as well. Not liking getting mocked, Devo gets all hostile, questioning if this is how people thank their saviors these days. Without hesitation, he reveals he didn't like Iboru in the first place, and this is the perfect opportunity for them to clash. "This works. Follow me, let's put our ranks aside and fight," he exclaims. But as it just so happens, these captains aren't here looking for a fight. Out of nowhere, they both bow in front of Devo and apologize. Iboru feels ashamed about judging them both biasedly while questioning their skills, a mark on his career as an adventurer. He profusely apologizes for his prejudice and hands over the agreed-upon amount. For 30 people, paying 50,000 mesos each, he gives Devo a bag filled with 1.5 million mesos. What's more, everyone even pitched in a bit more, as a thank you to their saviors. Being handed such a huge fortune, Devo was left speechless. However, Elpam chimes in, claiming they don't need it. He only wants the agreed 1.5 million mesos, commenting on how he only did the work he was paid to do. "You can put away that thank you," he states. With this, Devo begins counting the money, while Elpam talks with Iboru, asking if he can complete a job he is paid to do. All the while, at the Gaper Merchants, Evis tries to knock some sense into his boss. He explains that 10 million is an amount that is paid to get third or even fourth circle adventurers, and paying Elpam so much isn't a good idea. Although he is for sure the best candidate they have, this will set a bad precedent if Raken agrees to this deal. He suggests that Elpam might have just been testing the waters, and it's probably better to call them back to negotiate the pay. But Raken isn't really keen on this idea. To him, it wouldn't even be weird if Elpam asked for twice that amount. Obviously, hearing this, Evis is left shocked as Raken hands him a document revealing Elpam's party will be the only one to represent the Gaper Merchants this time. And when Evis begins reading the document, he is left paralyzed with fear. It just so happens that Dark Lord Jean, a fearsome and troublesome guy, is taking part in the Gate expedition as well. Raken, seeing the unease on Evis's face, tells him to not be mistaken about the circumstances. The war is already on. Nonetheless, time passes by in a flash, and on the fateful day of the 100-man Gate subjugation, Elpam and Divo show up on the site. Apparently, their outlandish terms were accepted, and hence, they are here to complete their mission. They are seeing these two to be the ones representing the Gaper Merchants. All the other adventurers begin glaring at them. Seeing the hostility, Divo remarks on the uncomfortable atmosphere of this place. Suddenly, they are approached by a rather shady-looking individual who asks if they are the Gaper Merchants' representatives. He introduces himself as Shulden, an E-class adventurer from the Genius Merchant Union. To this, Elpam introduces himself as a C-class explorer, leaving Shulden in cold sweats. As far as he knows, only 1 or 2 Circle explorers could enter the Gate because of the restrictions. If so, why on earth is a Class C warrior here? However, before he can get any sort of answer, their conversation is interrupted by a blonde female knight who claims to have some business with Elpam. Seeing her, Shulden immediately bows out of there. In a flashback, it is revealed that Evis asked Elpam to work with another party. Our Gaper Merchant Union will be working with the Cygnus Knight Order for this Gate, he explains. The Cygnus Knights are a group that follows the Empress Cygnus, and are considered to be the strongest group. As fate would have it, this powerful Empress has shown interest in this Gate. The quota for the Gate was already taken up by other merchants, and hence, the Gapers decided to work with them. Even though only their trainee knights will take part, their chances of success will go up, without a doubt, with their help. Although they might have ulterior motives, the offer the Cygnus Knights made them was too good to pass up on. Anyways, since there is no choice, Elpam agrees to work with them, thinking they won't be much trouble. But Evis doubts this, stating he feels something is off about that order. Back on the site, the knight introduces herself as Kiri, the one leading the trainee knights. She arrogantly tells them to not cause any trouble and follow her instructions. Moreover, after learning these two are the only ones the Merchant Union sent, she begins wondering if maybe the Gapers have already given up. Just then, the party from the Dig Merchants and Murdia Merchants show up. With their arrival, the atmosphere completely changes, but they aren't alone. The Gold-Rich Merchant Union party also shows up, consisting of 3 sisters. Seeing this, Kiri gets all agitated about their appearance. Anyways, with everyone gathered, the show finally begins. Ronko, the one chosen to be the guard for this raid, introduces himself as the support for this mission. There, he also reminds them of the rules. The legendary items that will come out of the Gate will be handed over to the adventurers' respective unions. However, by chance, if they are caught pocketing these valuable items, they will have to face him, as well as his team of B-class adventurers. Diva mimics that Ronko is a 5-circle adventurer, wondering if maybe his entire team is as strong as him. Still, this marks the end of the announcement, and he tells everyone to enter the Gate. Consequently, Kiri takes charge, announcing, "We will be the ones to succeed." On the other hand, Divo isn't really happy about Kiri's high and mighty attitude, whereas Elpam is waiting in anticipation. "Everything he has done so far was for this moment. All my efforts were for this Gate," he exclaims. In his previous life, he was unable to overcome this before, but he has to succeed since everything started here. Without hesitation, Elpam and Divo take their first steps inside the Gate. Later on, a report from the 100-man Gate is released. The summary? Well, each and every one of the Merchant Union parties has been wiped out, and the raid is deemed to have failed. Pretty ominous if you ask me. As they enter, they are welcomed by a vast, open grassland. Inside, Divo is left stunned at the size of the grass, and begins getting distracted, only to get an earful from Kirim, telling him to hurry and keep up with the rest of the group. Of course, Divo has already had enough of Kiri's cocky attitude, and wonders how long Elpam is going to continue acting as her subordinate. However, as he turns back, he finds his all-powerful boss kneeling on the ground, listening to any sounds he can hear. Just then, something begins to move in the distance. And what might that something be, you might ask? Well, it's a huge horde of ribbon pigs. From what the adventurers can see, there are roughly 1,000 of these monsters, and they all rush in to attack at once. Such a huge army is enough to leave everyone in a state of panic. Sensing the danger, Kiri tries to gather everyone up, telling them to spread out and gather the monsters' attention. Some of the parties have yet to enter, and in the adventuring world, there is an unspoken rule that entering parties shouldn't get involved in fighting immediately. Consequently, the Singus May Order and the El Mido merchant team split up, going in opposite directions to lure away their enemies. Luckily, the dumb beasts fall right into their trap and begin chasing after the fleeing humans. There, Kiri decides to continue heading towards the forests, explaining that there are bound to be plenty of obstacles there, providing them with a better chance to hunt these beasts easily. However, there's one problem. During all the commotion, they have lost sight of Elpam and Devo. Little do they know, this duo is currently the safest out of all others. Thanks to Elpam's precautions, they managed to create some distance between themselves and the pigs. Looks like we can relax a bit now, Devo exclaims. He also wonders how his boss knew about the pigs. Elpam reveals that there are a lot of monsters that move in clusters in vast plains. The ribbon pigs are ferocious monsters, almost a meter in length and move in herds, ranging from hundreds to thousands. What's more, they look like Ronnie Coleman if he was huge, completely jacked, and on steroids. Although they are for sure tough, they aren't invincible. Nevertheless, it's not a good idea to waste stamina from the start, so the different teams will probably try to lose them amongst each other. Still, there is no way to know what kinds of monsters will show up from here on out. He deems this cannot be the end, especially since Sleepywood's 100-man gate subjugation ended in failure, with the death of all the adventurers who entered in his previous life. Anyways, the duo begins exploring the vast plains when, suddenly, Devo mindlessly stumbles on a rope, resulting in a spiked trap flying toward them. Fortunately, Elpam manages to save Devo, and they both contemplate who on earth could have left a trap in place like this. Meanwhile, other adventurers have encountered similar circumstances and are disarming every trap they come across. This party, led by a masked man named Crocus, comments on how, though lackluster, the traps are still lethal. The fact is, the monsters copy the hunting methods of humans, meaning they aren't fighting ordinary beasts. If it's a monster with this much intelligence, it's a hob. They conclude, hobs are troublesome opponents, so they might be the boss of this gate. Crocus claims that the difficulty of this gate is too high, so much so that if he wasn't around, his party would have been wiped out. Nevertheless, he wants to try and make the best of the situation, and begins to move. However, out of nowhere, all of his men begin dropping like flies. A masked assassin appears, and begins decapitating the adventurers, completing the massacre in the blink of an eye. This masked figure decides to take a small breather. As he leisurely sits in the vast grasslands, he wonders who might be responsible for shifting the attention at the entrance, using the ribbon pigs as bait. Regardless, whoever it might have been, this has made his job a whole lot easier. Since the tides are in his favor, he decides to get back to work. Also, he doesn't seem too thrilled about it. Ah, how annoying, he mumbles. Still, seeing as how he is running out of time, he has to get to the task at hand. All of a sudden, the Gold Rich Merchant Union team is seen standing idly behind this man, unable to even lift a finger. Apparently, their efforts are all futile since the man has already cast a paralysis spell on them. At least for 30 more minutes, they are at the whims of this crazed killer. Just then, the oldest sister, despite being under the influence of this spell, begins to speak, asking, "Why would you do such a thing?" Hearing this, the man is left impressed that she is still able to speak while in that state. However, this makes him wary of her, and he decides to kill her right here and now, since she looks dangerous. And so, he stabs her in the stomach, dropping her to the ground to slowly bleed out. In the meantime, he tries to give a proper reply to her question. After a while of thought, he announces that all shall be done for the Black Mage, as he unleashes Fire Arrow, blowing the remaining sisters into smithereens. Alas, with one task done, he finds another commotion in the distance, remarking at how there is just no end to them. Seems like he's having a bad day. The man desperately wants to take a break now, but recalls something important. In a flashback, this man, revealed to be named William, kneels before the white-haired gay vampire from before. Apparently, the man has waited ages for this day. avoiding the watch of his enemies and keeping his identity hidden to ingrain his roots and spread his power and influence. And now is the time to bear fruit. With this, the man hands over a flaming feather to William, revealing this as a gift bestowed by him. Failure will not be tolerated, he proclaims. Remembering the words of his master, William is left shaken to his core and comes to the conclusion he shouldn't be cutting corners under these circumstances. As such, he deems it to be an unavoidable matter and decides to work a bit harder than usual as he walks away. Eventually, the day turns into night. Somewhere inside the gate, a bustling town, fortified with barriers and protected by a group of hobs, is seen. As it turns out, Elpam and Divo happen across this town. And seeing the scope of it, Divo is left with shivers down his spine. What the hell are those? He wonders. He questions if all of these are boss monsters, but as Elpam already told him, there is only one among them who is the true boss. Nevertheless, their numbers are a problem, not to mention the fact that each and every single one of the hobs will be a pain to deal with thanks to their high strength and health stats. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The monsters are also well commanded, seeing as how they have looted the items off of the dead explorers to use for their own, especially if you take into account that some of those items have skills that can be activated. Monsters using magical weapons. Now that's going to be interesting. Of course, though, it might be interesting for us as the viewers. Divo was left wetting his pants, and why wouldn't he be? Such a situation is almost unheard of. To him, this makes the monsters almost no different than a pack of super strong explorers. He questions if Elpam is planning to kill the entire town, with just the two of them, and obviously, that is exactly what his boss had in mind. He never was one to shy away from a challenge after all. Meanwhile, Divo is freaking out after hearing his master's plans. He claims it's impossible with just the two of them, and it's better to just head back and join up with Kiri. Although he wanted to split up with the Cygnus Knights at first, he didn't know about the existence of such beasts. Regardless, he refuses to take part with just the two of them. However, Elpam, like the genius he is, comes up with a new plan of action. And so, as the Hob monsters continue their mundane tasks, out of nowhere, they are attacked by Divo, who reveals that his condition of attacking with just the two of them is complete. Instead, he has been sent out alone. Unfortunately, the monster is able to dodge the first strike by the skin of its teeth and tries to counterattack. But Divo isn't a mere pushover. Slowly but surely getting the hang of his new pole-arm weapon, he manages to get out of the way, repeatedly dodging every strike by a hair's breadth. Eventually, he gets tired of running around and tells the monster to pipe down, landing a fierce attack right on his opponent's face. He even slices up the hob's leg, forcing it to collapse to the ground, shrieking in pain. With this, Divo moves in to seal the deal. "You're finished," he announces as he prepares to slash open the monster's back, but much to his surprise, the monster is still able to get away. Despite its injuries, the beast finds an opening, pushing Divo square in the face and sending him flying into a nearby tree. Luckily for him, he barely blocked the brunt of the blow thanks to his polearm. Still, the fight is far from over. The monster continues its rampage. Nevertheless, after a long, difficult battle, Divo is the one who comes out as the victor, kind of tickled that his boss really didn't help him. To Elpam, it didn't look like his teammate needed any help, and this must have built up his confidence. Anyways, they begin moving soon enough, and that is when they discover something unfathomable. What's all this? Divo questions as he lays eyes on the massacre of the Cygnus Knights. Suddenly, they hear some groaning in the background, revealing that there is a survivor amidst the corpses. Seeing him, Elpam heads to his side, asking if they were overwhelmed by a hob. However, the survivor explains that this tragedy was caused by trolling. Back at the Gaper Merchant's headquarters, Evis is seen thinking about the circumstances. He explains that there are those who attack explorers inside the gate, using the gate's ability to not allow anyone to peek inside. This is what trolling is. Because of this, there is no better place for a crime scene than the gate, since the evidence disappears once the survivor escapes. However, in this case, it's no different than having a competition without a winner. Currently, the members inside the gate must defeat the gate, now with even fewer people. If one person somehow succeeds in escaping with a unique item, it will be under heavy suspicion from everyone else. All this leaves Evis confused, and he wonders if the reason for trolling under these conditions is for the sake of killing the ace members of other groups, but he quickly rejects this idea. And that is when he finally connects some dots. Could there be a greater mastermind behind this? He wonders. Back inside the gate, the survivor claims everything is his fault. her not realizing there was an enemy among them, proclaiming Kiri to be the traitor. Of course, Elpam has a tough time believing this, especially since Kiri was a member of the Order, but the survivor reveals that Kiri claimed to be a follower of the Black Mage. As one of the most powerful beings in the universe, known as Transcendence, the Black Mage threatened the world 800 years ago, along with his countless followers. In order to stop his evil plan from coming to fruition, the 6 heroes rose to stop him. However, to do so, they had to seal themselves along with the Black Mage, turning the tables of the war. After this, the Allied forces then countered the followers of the Black Mage, leading to their complete disappearance. Hearing all this, Elpam decides it's better for them to stop their monster hunt and find Kiri first. As a result, he asks if the survivor wants to tag along, since he is the one best suited to clash swords with her. To this, the survivor immediately agrees, and they begin to move immediately. Meanwhile, Kiri herself is seen fleeing from something when she comes across the masked assassin and William. Seeing her here, William finally understands that she was the one who split apart the group, aiding their mission. Tasked with her, they are now in the final stages, but Kiri is completely uninterested in all this. With a look of rage on her face, she pulls out her sword, questioning, "Who are you people?" Back at the massacre site, Divo helps the survivor travel, giving him a shoulder to lean on. Apparently, Elpam has gone ahead to search for Kiri, and so Divo tells the survivor not to worry, since he will meet with her soon. But it looks like Divo is in a world of trouble. The survivor appears to be planning something malicious and readies his weapon for a sneak attack. On the other hand, the masked assassin, who doesn't appear to be masked at the moment, begins exchanging blows with Kiri, while William watches from the sidelines, impressed at the strength the leader of the training Cygnus Knights possesses. But the million-dollar question is, how long can she keep at it? Alas, this question is immediately answered when Kiri evades an incoming strike and uses the chance to counter. Unleashing her technique, Rising Sun, she gets into an attacking stance, almost as if inviting the assassin to attack. And just as the poor assassin takes the bait, she parries the strike and moves in for the kill, swiftly decapitating her opponent in the blink of an eye. Nevertheless, the show is far from over. Although exhausted from the battle, she keeps up her tough demeanor, demanding to know the purpose of these low lives. However, William still has some tricks up his sleeve. Seeing his comrade bite the dust, he immediately orders the others to finish her off. Heeding his command, a bunch of enemies jump out from the tall grass blades, trying to gang up on their foes and end things. Just then, out of nowhere, a mysterious figure appears on sight. With a single swing, the figure takes down all 3 attackers, leaving William. There, as Kiri is left stunned, she recognizes this figure to be a familiar face, revealing it to be none other than Divo. As it turns out, when he was escorting the supposed survivor, he was almost beheaded. Luckily for him, the survivor's hand is blown clean off his body, and he collapses to the ground, shrieking in pain. Elpam, realizing something shady is going on, appears behind them. Frankly, he is simply unimpressed. "This is what you do the moment I give you the chance?" he questions. Unfortunately, his plan was flawed from the start. "I don't trust people to begin with," Elpam announces as he charges up his staff to burn this treacherous scumbag to a crisp. And that's how we arrive here at the grassy plains. Divo and Kiri stand united in front of William, who doesn't look too happy about the arrival of this uninvited guest. His team reveals Divo is a member of the Gaper Merchant's team, and seeing as he is alive, this must mean that Pitten, aka the survivor, has failed. Of course, William is disappointed in Pitten, deeming him to be a coward who couldn't even kill himself for failing his mission. Not only did he make the mistake of letting Kiri escape, but he even failed to make up for his mistake when given the chance. Nonetheless, all this means is a bit more work to do. William, understanding that the opponents are quite skilled, decides to call out the elites from his side as well. Seeing the troops come into play, Kiri becomes visibly distressed and warns Divo to be careful, though her warning falls on empty ears, since the idiot Divo is just raring to go. In the blink of an eye, the foes come dashing at them, and, being the ever-so-confident guy he is, Divo tells Kiri to take care of at least one, while he handles the rest. With this, both parties begin exchanging blows. But, as luck would have it, Divo has the upper hand in power. As one of the enemies comes to attack him, he begins swinging his axe, barely missing his target by a hair's breadth. If this was a 1 versus 1, Divo would come out as the victor, no questions asked. However, the reality is that they are outnumbered. Using their numbers, the enemies begin working together, using both short and long-range attacks to keep their enemies at bay. And just when Devo gets a bit distracted, one of the attackers manages to close the distance and launches a sneak attack, nicking him in the back. However, this is only just the beginning. Thinking Devo is running out of steam, the attackers continue their blows, moving in for the kill. Meanwhile, all Kiri can do is try and defend against one foe, as she worries about her ally. But little does she know, this is all an act. Devo easily escapes the ending blow, announcing that he was just playing along until now. As such, he puts an end to all the fun and begins hacking into the opponents. Talk about being a party pooper. Obviously, the Black Mage followers aren't too glad about their comrade being cut into pieces, and they try to get revenge only to be easily evaded and smacked away. And things just keep getting worse and worse for them. Disappointing. You call these your elites? Kiri questions as she kicks away her opponent. Hearing these taunts, the assassins are left enraged and get back on their feet to continue, but William has had enough of being a bystander. He cannot allow this farce to go on and hence charges his staff to end things once and for all. All the while, Devo finds William's attack to be something he is familiar with, Elpam's fire arrow. Not only that, Williams is much faster than his bosses. In a flash, the blast reaches Devo and all he can do is stand idly, unable to move. Just like that, a huge explosion occurs. Witnessing this, William begins getting cocky, boasting of his technique. To him, it's clear that Devo won't make it out alive, and now all that's left is to take care of Kiri and proceed with the subjugation. However, the plot armor is thick with our beloved redhead. The grin on William's face quickly turns to panic when he finds Devo standing there without a scratch, and Elpam standing in front of him. With an emotionless glare, he pierces right through William's soul, leaving him shivering. "Who are you?" he asks in a shuddering voice, but Elpam remains quiet. All of a sudden, he points out into the distance, resulting in a horde of red-ribbon pigs emerging from the grass and trampling over the Black Mage's followers in an instant. Having been caught up in this unforeseen situation, the Black Mage followers quickly get into formation and try to overpower these god-forsaken steroid pigs. Eventually, they clean up, but the aftermath has left everyone exhausted. William, especially, never expected that Elpam and Devo would run off after dumping these beasts on them. Regardless, he checks up on his subordinates, who appear to have finished dealing with their share of the pigs as well. With this, William suggests they immediately begin searching for their foes, since they don't have any time to reorganize, and the others agree. Consequently, they begin searching for clues. All the while, William is left deep in thought. He reveals that if Elpam and Devo somehow manage to escape the gate, things will become really troublesome. Anyway, they soon find some footprints, and the Black Mage followers begin their hunt, led by William, who wants to take on Elpam on his own. However, the subordinates don't want their leader to be troubled. He comments on how, to him, Elpam seemed like a small fry, and explains there is no need for William to face him alone. Alas, William's mind has already been made up. He claims he is the most powerful guy in the gate, and hence, there is no need for weaklings to be worried about him. On the flip side, Kiri, Devo, and Elpam manage to make it out on the grassy plains and venture into the forest. On the way, Devo looks pretty happy about William and the others being trampled to death, but Elpam reveals that isn't the case. Those followers aren't the type to die from just that, and warn Devo to pay attention to where he is stepping. You might remember the forest was laced with booby traps. However, Devo seems to be more curious about why his boss didn't just finish off their foes there. I mean, if it's Elpam, he could have found an opening and defeated the enemy. But Elpam's answer leaves him speechless. "Because they are stronger than me," he exclaims, leaving Devo in a state of confusion. In Elpam's mind, he explains that William's fire arrow back then was unlike anything he had seen before. In a flashback, he only managed to save Devo from the attack by unleashing a fire arrow of his own. But despite his power, his attack only managed to shift the trajectory of William's attack by a little. On the other hand, not trying to freak out, Devo questions if this is really the truth, asking if they really ran away back then, and Elpam confirms this to be the truth. All of a sudden, he begins to check out his circle lines. As per him, his circle has thickened to its limit. He reveals that, as the circle becomes thicker, so does the power of the host. Meaning the same spell will change in speed and power, and since he is already at the peak of the second circle rank, he should have at least been equal to William, if not have surpassed him. But despite this, his spell was beyond logic. Of course, the gate's sentry requirements confirm William is a second circle, leaving only one possibility. He must have reinforced his skills through unknown means. He's probably the strongest explorer in this gate, Elpam states. This leaves Divo in an utter state of confusion, and he begins to wonder what their next plan of action will be. He suggests they use the Hobbs in the same way they did the Ribbon Pigs, but Elpam refuses, explaining the Hobbs are different and could also figure out the relation between them and the Black Mage followers. Talk about being smart. Suddenly, Kiri decides to chime in as well. She proclaims that her allies are forgetting the most important issue. In her eyes, what's important is that a Black Mage follower managed to infiltrate the Cygnus Knights, a matter where the fate of the entire world lies upon. As such, she wants to leave this place as soon as possible and inform her higher-ups. Nonetheless, Elpam is against this idea, making Kiri furious. Instantly, she begins condemning Elpam, claiming she expected this from a former slave. To her, it looks like he is lusting after the subjugation rewards, but that is not the case. Elpam cuts her off, popping her little bubble of cockiness. He questions what Kiri's plan is after informing her higher-ups. At least to him, it wouldn't mean the end of the Black Mage followers. Don't underestimate them, he warns her. The followers have hidden their identities and ingrown their roots for several centuries already, and merely announcing their return would only make them dig deeper underground to hide. If they choose to do so, no one will be able to find them, and they will gnaw away at the world in places where no one watches them, slowly but surely. But it doesn't look like Kiri is too keen about being told off. Out of nowhere, she grabs Elpam by the collar, telling him to shut up. She demands to know of any other suggestions Elpam has, telling him to not mouth off if he doesn't have any concrete plan. The fact is, they are being pursued by these dangerous groups, and they need to escape before they are caught. However, our boy, though he looks like it, isn't dumb. We simply have to teach them who the hunter is, he exclaims. Elsewhere in the forest, the small fry followers dash around, trying to find any sign of their target's defeat. After all, if they fail, they might have to forfeit their lives. Consequently, out of the bushes, Divo launches a sneak attack at his foes. However, the attacker is able to dodge just in the nick of time. In response, his comrade tries to join in on the battle, but Kiri helps out, setting off a booby trap that crushes one of the followers. With this, Divo continues his rampaging, but the attacker, thanks to his swift movements, gets out of the way. Not only that, he then begins to pummel his opponent to the ground, using nothing but his fists. Well, maybe his knees and legs also, but who cares about that? Bro might be a Muay Thai specialist in hiding. As he beats the Black Mage follower senselessly, one of the foes tries to shoot Divo down from a distance, freaking out about what on earth is going on. However, little does she know, Kiri is already behind her. The two immediately begin exchanging blows, and Kiri almost manages to land the ending blow, though it is parried at the last possible second. On the other hand, William realizes that his subordinates are already fighting and sees Elpam standing in front of him in the distance. And as soon as they both lock eyes, William charges up his fire arrow. As a result, he unleashes a mighty blast towards Elpam, but Elpam manages to dodge and sends out one of his own. Seeing the ferocity of the blast, William is left impressed and grins like a madman. Upon impact, the blast creates a huge explosion, and Elpam waits in anticipation to continue his rampage. However, even before the dust settles, something comes flying his way. Instinctively, Elpam leans back to avoid it and realizes he has messed up. Was that all you had? William questions as he closes in the distance and sneaks up behind his foe. With this from point-blank range, he unleashes yet another fire arrow. This causes the entire area to catch fire, but still, Elpam remains standing without a scratch on him. This leaves even William baffled, and he remarks on how he didn't expect such an outcome. From his perspective, Elpam nullified his blast, but the question is how. One thing's for certain, Elpam doesn't have the firepower to block William's attacks. So then, how was he able to mollify the blow in an instant? Of course, Elpam isn't stupid enough to reveal his trick. Understanding he isn't the talkative sort, William decides to cut his losses and continue the battle. I mean, they can't be all chitty-chatty in the middle of a fight anyway. Bro, that's like the only thing that happens between fights. That and murder. Regardless, he just decides to figure it out by himself later and begins sending fire arrows at his opponent. Alas, the same trick won't work twice on Elpam, who unleashes his revolver skill. As the two techniques collide headfirst, William is left stunned by Elpam's ingenuity. He realizes that his foe has spun his fire arrow with his telekinesis power, and thanks to this added spin, he's able to chip down his spell like a drill. However, before he can contemplate everything, Elpam manages to break through, dealing substantial damage to William, who is sent flying back. Witnessing such skill, William recognizes his adversary to be one of those so-called geniuses, but all this does is give him an even creepier grin. Apparently, these geniuses are the type he hates the most in the world, and so he decided to enjoy this special occasion a bit more. Wanting to see what Elpam is truly capable of, he unleashes yet another fire arrow, but this time, instead of dancing around trying to dodge it, Elpam uses his telekinesis to gather rocks in the area to create a shield. Nevertheless, much to his surprise, the shield ends up backfiring, and he is forced to jump out of the way recklessly. Seeing this, William begins getting all cocky, asking if this is all he can muster up. Alas, this is all part of Elpam's master plan. Just when his foe gets confident in his abilities, Elpam uses his telekinesis to manipulate the fire arrow, forcing William to avoid all the strikes by the giant behemoth. Slowly but surely, this begins annoying him, and he has had enough. Playtime is over, he announces as he sends yet another fire arrow at his opponent. And once more, Elpam uses his revolver skill to counter, but there's a small difference between then and now. As of now, Elpam has used up both of his spells, meaning he is virtually unarmed. As a result, William sneaks up behind him and uses Poison Breath. This skill catches Elpam by surprise, and he ends up getting caught. As such, William inches closer to his foe, explaining that although the Poison Breath is a powerful skill, it leaves him wide open for attacks. Still, if he can bait out the fire arrow's cooldown, he should be able to stop his attacks, and now it will be impossible for his opponent to move for 30 minutes, rendering him completely powerless in this situation. Anyway, William's fire arrow is also on cooldown, and so he decides to finish off Elpam with a dagger. With this, he begins inching closer to Elpam, excited for what is about to come. Apparently, this is his favorite part, seeing the face of despair his prey makes when they face certain death. With a creepy and crazed expression, he walks closer and closer, but all his hopes and dreams are crushed in a single second when Elpam, despite being under the suppressed effect of the poison breath, begins to move and punches him square in the face. Got him, his eyes popping out of his skull. That's gonna leave a bruise. In a flashback, in the pub after their last mission, a drunk Ibru drills Divo for answers. He asks how on earth Elpam manages to overcome the mad mushroom's poison, and even offers to pay for the drinks, if Divo tells him. However, Divo explains there is no use hearing about it. I mean, it's a skill that one can't copy just by hearing about it, and he reveals this technique to be named Room. As per him, in this skill, Elpam sucks in the air and traps it using his telekinesis. When fighting against the mushroom monster, he thought for sure he was a dead man, but his boss sucked all the poison. Hearing this, Iburu is left stunned at the capabilities of Elpam, and Divo just laughs it out, announcing my boss is way too overpowered. Back in the forest, Elpam gives William the mother of all beatdowns. He beats the living daylights out of his foe, knocking him senseless. Still, William refuses to give up. Despite the beating, he tries to use Poison Breath once more, but before he can complete the casting, Elpam delivers a swift uppercut. If this was real life, his tongue would have been cut into two. But the show is still far from over. One after the other, Elpam pounds his punches into William's body and sends him crashing into a nearby tree, before summoning his staff to charge up the last blow. He unleashes the last fire arrow and shoots it straight toward William, who buckles under the pressure and is blown to bits, along with the tree he crashed into. Alas, even this won't be enough to break William's spirit. Just in the nick of time, he manages to get away from the fatal strike, losing only a hand. Despite his wounds, he refuses to go down. All of a sudden, his ring begins to glow a greenish hue, and his anger erupts. How dare you? He angrily questions as a mist of green. Poisonous gas takes over the whole area. Of course, this isn't anything to worry about, especially for someone like Elpam, who already has a perfect counter. Yet again, he uses his telekinesis power to use his room skill, capturing all the poisonous gas and staying out of harm's way. However, he also realizes this attack is merely a feint, and his opponent is actually aiming for something else, while pretending to have lost his mind. Even William knows Poison Breath won't work against him, leading Elpam to only one conclusion. In this situation, his best plan would be to retrieve his staff, he thinks. As a result, he begins keeping a close eye on William's staff, deciding to end things once and for all, once William tries to get his hands on it. However, it appears Elpam has made a grave error. While he gives his complete, undivided attention to the stray staff, he fails to sense a fiery blast coming at him from behind. As fate would have it, William's bag of tricks wasn't empty yet, and from his deranged and cursed state, he unleashed this fearsome blow. The aftermath of the battle. Elpam is lying on the ground in tatters, vomiting blood. In that moment, he never expected his foe to have something as powerful as a flame orb hidden up his sleeve, quite literally. And this is the mistake for being so careless, a grave error he wouldn't have made in his previous life. I'm slacking off, he realizes, but the show is far from over. Wanting to keep up the pursuit, William sends out a barrage of blows, all hurling towards the defenseless Elpam. In the distance, Divio, who is beating the crap out of his opponent, is left concerned after hearing the explosion and begins worrying about his boss. Meanwhile, Kiri is still fighting with her partner and eventually is able to take off his head. With this, she orders Divio to stop getting distracted and finish things. Even if it's Elpam, William is too tough to fight alone, but fate has other ideas in mind. Just before Divio seals the deal, an arrow comes flying out of nowhere, landing directly in one of the Black Mage followers' eyes. Seeing this, Divio is left distressed and hurriedly looks around to find the culprit, seeing they are being pursued by a group of Hobbs. The Hobbs charge at them, using both short and long-range weapons, leaving Kiri and Divio in a pickle as they ready themselves for yet another fight. By the looks of it, Kiri isn't quite as concerned about this horde, but Divio warns her not to take them lightly. Obviously, the Hobbs aren't as easy of an enemy as she thinks, not to mention the fact that there is a creepy one mixed in there. All of a sudden, the Hobbs bring out a wooden throne, on top of which a giant Hobb is seen sitting leisurely. On the other hand, William finally takes a sigh of relief, wondering if his damned opponent is finally dead or not. Nevertheless, he doesn't have the luxury of sitting around and waiting. The battle has left him with major damage, and he begins to cough up blood as he collapses to the ground. Even in this state, he keeps up his high and mighty attitude, deeming Elpam to be pretty good. He never expected to be pushed into a corner like this and wonders if he should have maybe known the name of this great warrior before killing him. Just then, he hears a voice. Elpam, remember it well, since that's the last name you'll ever hear in your life, the voice announces. Suddenly, out of the fiery explosion, Elpam comes walking out. Seeing him, William is left distressed, but thinks Elpam is just bluffing. I mean, who could come out of such an attack completely unharmed? But it's not like Elpam didn't know this. Apparently, he gave up on defeating William head-on, well, at least while he was still in the second circle rank. As such, he pulls out a magic stone, prompting William to burst out loud laughing. He calls Elpam a madman, questioning if he is really planning on ranking up by absorbing a magic stone. As per him, this is just an idiotic idea and isn't possible. What you need is knowledge through countless experiences, he proclaims. However, Elpam still remains confident. Little does our little William know, Elpam already has plenty of experience on hand, being a time traveler and all. Just like that, he utilizes the orb's energy and becomes a third circle explorer. Despite this, William simply chalks it up to be a mere illusion and continues the battle, moving in to deliver the final blow, not wanting to face reality. Oh, but fate is a cruel mistress. Right when he is on top of the world, he is brought back to his knees. Now having ranked up, Elpam unleashes a new and improved fire arrow, launching it towards William, who is left speechless and shuddering after seeing the speed and power of the blast. In response, he too unleashes his fire orb in an attempt to parry the attack, but he has seemingly forgotten one thing, Elpam's telekinesis. Using this, Elpam gives his fire arrow a rotating motion, allowing his attack to pierce cleanly through the fire orb as well as William. And as the dust settles down, William's corpse, well, at least half of it, is laid on the ground. On the flip side, the Hobbs start to scope out the surroundings, while Kiri is seen hiding inside some bushes along with an injured Devo. Realizing the situation has taken a turn for the worse, she panics and thinks about what to do next. In a flashback, Devo dashes into the enemy horde, wailing like a crazy person, raining down one Hobb after another. All the while, it takes all Kiri has to even face one of these monstrous beasts, and she wonders how on earth her ally is able to defeat such fearsome foes so easily. But Devo was never one to care much about jealousy and continued his rampage. He claims to be able to read his opponent's patterns like a book, dodging every single attack coming his way, and even finding the perfect opportunity to counter. However, out of nowhere, he is hit by a giant ball of flame, causing a huge explosion. All this commotion takes Kiri by surprise, leaving her distressed about recognizing this attack to be orbital flame launched by the leader of the Hobb group. To her, it makes no sense how a monster is able to cast such a spell. Back in the present, she is still confused. She has never even heard about a monster that could use items. For now, all she can do is try and hide, hoping to reunite with Divo if he is still alive. Alas, her worst fears come to fruition. One of the Hobbs manages to track her down and tries to turn her, along with Divo, into a pancake. Of course, Kira is able to get out of the way, but the Hobbs waste no time in continuing their pursuit. Using their number advantage, they surround her on all sides, leaving her in a pickle. In such a situation, she feels as though she can do nothing, especially while trying to protect an unconscious and severely wounded Divo. Just as they are about to be hacked into pieces, she flings Divo up into the air, spontaneously slicing the Hob into two, before catching her ally and continuing to run. In her mind, defeating this horde would have been possible, though not likely if she could fight them one by one. Too bad the monsters won't just quietly form a line to do so. As a result, the best plan of action is to just run, like Forrest Gump. Just then, she senses danger coming her way, forcing her to come to a dead stop. Luckily, her instincts allow her to avoid getting caught up in a huge blast sent out by the Hob leader, who begins chuckling sinisterly from his throne. One after another, the Hob leader sends out blasts to take down his enemies. Eventually, Kiri starts to get tired. This causes her to end up getting caught in one of the blasts, leading to a huge explosion. Seeing this, the Hob leader begins to laugh loudly, thinking this is the end of his troubles. Little does he know he has messed with the wrong people. As the dust settles, Divo emerges from the attack. Apparently, in the midst of all the chaos, he woke up and protected Kiri from certain death. Regardless, now that he is up and raring to go, he dashes in at full speed. Aiming for a frontal clash, he expertly uses his pole arm, and the foes begin dropping like flies. Even though the Hobbs try their best to utilize their huge numbers, their tactics prove to be ineffective against a nimble and swift guy like our beloved Redhead. The Hob leader quickly recognizes this fact. I guess he isn't the leader for nothing. Pretty intelligent for a monster, if you ask me. Consequently, the leader has a genius idea. Using one of his subordinates as bait, he launches his orbital flame at Divo, taking out his comrade in the process. Nonetheless, Divo has seen through all these underhanded tactics already. He skillfully evades the attack and jumps up into the air, aiming to bring down the enemy commander and end the fight as soon as possible. All the while, Kiri is left to witness this performance from the sidelines and is left bewildered. No way is he really just a first circle, she wonders. Just like that, Divo angrily rushes to land the final blow. However, the Hob leader sees it coming. Just before the strike makes contact, the Hob leader unleashes an orbital flame. Luckily, he manages to blow Divo away with this blow, sending him flying into Kiri's arms. Alas, not everything works out the way you want it. Divo's pole arm is able to crush the Hob leader's jaw. This results in the Hob getting even more furious, and he uses all his remaining power to create a huge fireball. On the other hand, taking the previous blow head-on without any sort of defense has left Divo barely able to stand up. Therefore, Kiri takes the lead, telling him to stand back so she can face the Hobbs from here on out. Obviously, she too is fearful of what is about to come, but keeps steadfast. Ultimately, the Hob leader sends the orbital flame hurling towards his foes. However, out of nowhere, yet another fireball comes into frame, colliding with the Hob leader's attack. Not only that, this fireball is able to cleanly pierce through the counterblast, and even reaches the Hob leader, taking off his head in the blink of an eye. Seeing this, Kiri is left with shivers down her spine. Just then, a seriously injured Divo comes into the frame. Looks like I'm not too late, he proclaims. Outside the gate, Ronco is leisurely sitting around, yawning the day away. According to him, it has been 3 days since the subjugation started and the applicants went in, but there is still no news from them. He just wanted to make some easy cash, while taking it easy after a long trip. However, the ordeal has got him all nervous. He comments on how this sort of gig is just not his style and contemplates turning down future requests to guard the gate base. Just then, he looks up to find everyone else running around. Seeing this, he wonders what the commotion is all about. That is when he witnesses the gate itself shatter into pieces. The wooden branches making up the portal gate spontaneously collapse and fall to the ground. Realizing something's gone terribly wrong, Ronco heads over to his comrades, who are already preparing to call for a bishop as soon as possible. Kiter, one of his comrades, explains that there are survivors who escaped the gate just in time, although the gate being destroyed likely means the subjugation has failed. All the while, Ronco stares at the survivors. Elpam, Kiri, and Devo, all of whom are severely injured and lying lifeless on the ground. This marks the end of the ordeal, but the aftermath is just beginning. Soon after, Elpam wakes up in a haze, in an unfamiliar place. On the side, Ronco is waiting for Elpam to awaken from his slumber and immediately begins the interrogation. He questions how, in this subjugation where the elites of each merchant union were hand-selected to participate, only the 3 people from Gaper merchants survived. Just what happened inside the gate. But Elpam's mind still seems to be in a blur, although he suspected it. It was unclear if they were the only survivors, but it turned out to be the case. He explains what took place. Demon, there's a demon in there, he exclaims. Obviously, Ronco is left confused after this statement, but Elpam asks for a pen and paper so he can draw it. Though he doesn't know the name of the monster, he can recall its appearance. Upon seeing the culprit, even Ronco is perplexed, though he accepts the reasoning. After the interrogation is done, a council is called to discuss the situation. All the merchant groups are called, and they complain, questioning how on earth this could have happened. Even if it was a 100-man gate, it was a mere red grade. Realistically speaking, there's no way those 100 elites got annihilated by monsters. What's more, some of the relatives of the merchant group leaders were also present in the subjugation. However, as far as Ronco can see, it's not likely Elpam is lying. He reveals the drawing Elpam made, explaining that the boss of the gate was a green hob. Seeing this, all the representatives are left speechless. As per them, green hobs are quite strong, and some of them are even known to use magic items. In addition, thanks to their intelligence, the hobs fight in a unified manner, similar to a human army, making them even more difficult targets. Suddenly, they start to believe Ronco as well, and of course, there is always a difficult one. Franco, from the Gold Ritchie Trade Union, speaks up, refusing to believe a single word of it. Apparently, although it might have been difficult, Natasha would have defeated the boss, and, at least for him, this leads to only one conclusion: trolling. It doesn't make sense. Unless there was a backstabber from the inside, he exclaims. Obviously, they cannot see the internal matters of a gate, and Franco suggests some of them might have had a change of heart. He doubts whether or not the deaths were accidental or premeditated. Not only that, it's highly suspicious that the only surviving members are from the same affiliation, aka the Gaper merchants, but Raken won't take this sort of nonsense without retaliation. He tells Franco to stop spouting his nonsense. He states that the only reason his team was able to come out alive was luck. Elpam managed to reach the 3rd circle rank, and hence, they survived while the others perished. That is the end of it. Alas, all this does is start a bickering war between the Gold Ritchie and Gaper merchants, and they begin going back and forth, even insulting each other's unions. All the while, Ronco is already wishing this passive-aggressive meeting would come to an end. Anyway, things eventually cool off, and Franco then asks why Raken is so confident in his claim, demanding evidence. Raken responds immediately, revealing that there were no items looted from within the gate. There is no motive behind them. You hear me, he announces, and so the meeting comes to an end. Seeing as how their interrogation is done, Ronco releases Elpam, Devo, and Kiri, and they walk off. Damn, Devo's still out. I guess he really got the stuffing beaten out of him. Of course, Ronco's team is still not sure if it's alright to release them, but there's nothing they can do, since everything has been concluded. On the other hand, our trio heads into the forest, where they come across something. Even Kiri is surprised to see this, surprised to see it actually followed after Elpam. And what might this something be? Well, it's a cute little snail. Back inside the gate, Kiri asks why Elpam is hesitating. They'd already killed the followers of the Black Mage and completely wiped out the Green Hog colony, and all that's left is for them to throw away any items they obtained, injure each other, and book it out of this place. But Elpam has something else in mind. Apparently, he's gotten his hands on loot too good to simply pass up. The Phoenix Feather. This item can increase the destructiveness of fire spells by a whopping 30%. In addition, its effect stacks. Having this item in hand, Elpam realizes this is the reason why all the explorers were wiped out in his previous life. For him, this is an unexpected gain, and he has to bring it back to the outside world, no matter what. But Kiri's concerns aren't invalid. If they leave the gate with items they didn't report in advance, they will surely be suspected of trolling. Her suggestion is that Elpam stops his meaningless greed and does as they planned, especially now that they have found the escape gate. And that is when they come across a snail. That's not an ordinary one, a snail pet. Unlike other snail monsters, The snail pet isn't aggressive and has a habit of collecting items in its shell. What's more, its unique characteristic allows its shell to grow larger, allowing more items to fit in. Apparently, the creature was first discovered after the gates opened in his previous life. In the present, Elpam grabs the snail pet, and it coughs up the 2 phoenix feathers. Seeing this, Kiri is surprised at what her comrade managed to achieve, and asks how on earth he figured out how to use the snail. But Elpam explains it's better to make anything work, rather than solely making a fuss about getting out of the gate. Regardless, now that they are out, Kiri inquires what their plan is now. In response, Elpam tells her not to worry. As per him, since the Black Mage followers have already infiltrated the Cygnus Knights, this information must be treated with extreme caution. If anything goes wrong, they may just hide deeper. But for now, he decides to just wait and see what unfolds. Elsewhere, a man is seen reporting to his master about the incident. He reveals that each and every one of the trade union parties was eliminated, and the subjugation has failed. As per the reports, the subjugation failed because the teams were annihilated by the boss monster, and only 3 members of the Gaper merchants were able to escape with their lives, though just barely. Despite being suspected of trolling at first, all of them were targeted towards the Gaper merchants, and not their organization. Still, the 3 were freed due to the lack of evidence. Anyway, although the mission has failed, their identities weren't revealed to the public, and hence, they still have a shot. As such, the man asks his master to allow him to prepare for the next operation. But you might be wondering who this mysterious master is. Well, it's our beloved medieval vampire dude, who isn't really happy about this report. According to him, their plan was to eliminate all the parties and proceed with the boss raid. However, if they have failed, the 3 survivors are sure to have encountered William. Still, there was no mention of such events. Hearing this, the subordinate tries to probe more, stating there is no reason to hide such information. Even if they did, there was no way of singling out their union, since all the followers were dispersed evenly in each group. But the vampire dude had something else in mind. What if he realized that the mastermind behind this incident isn't just an ordinary merchant group, but by the followers he questions? Hearing this, the subordinate is left distressed. If this is the case, the situation is very dire, and he suggests they remove all their members who have infiltrated the merchant groups so they won't get exposed further. But the leader realizes this is something else. Is this their invitation? How interesting. He chuckles. With a sinister grin on his face, he decides to accept Elpam's invitation. However, it would be best to change the stage to a place where Elpam is going to face death. All of a sudden, we are teleported to a forest somewhere, where an ominous tree is riddled with scars, almost like markings.